Jordan didn't go home. Not yet. He returned to the office after hours, locking the door behind him. The building was silent, just the faint tick of the wall clock and the humming of a distant vending machine. He made his way toward meeting room 2, the one used for private board discussions, the same room where Karen had insisted on a closed-door session last week. The security system had an internal archive grainy low resolution, but functional. Jordan wasn't trained in surveillance, but after years managing military operations, he knew how to spot unusual patterns. He scrolled through the footage. The first few clips were uneventful, empty chairs, mild arguments. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, something caught his attention. Karen walked into the room with a man Jordan didn't recognize, mid-40s, carrying a leather folder. No one else was present. The two sat close. Karen pulled out a thick HOA rulebook, flipped through it rapidly, and pointed to something on a page. The man nodded, took notes, then reached into his folder and pulled out what looked like pre-printed complaint templates. Jordan leaned forward. They weren't discussing violations, they were scripting them. He couldn't hear audio, but the man's lips moved in sync with the lines Jordan had read in the anonymous letters. The phrasing, the way the accusations were vague enough to avoid scrutiny, yet sharp enough to trigger concern. Karen tapped her pen twice on the table like punctuation. When the footage ended, Jordan sat back in silence. His hand hovered near the trackpad for a moment, then he exported the file to a secure drive he kept in his desk. As he did, something clicked into place. This wasn't just political maneuvering. It was personal. He wasn't new to being underestimated. People saw the chair before they saw the person. But Karen, she was weaving a story around it. A narrative of incompetence. She wanted the board to believe he couldn't keep up, that he was an outsider, misfit, someone who couldn't handle pressure. He looked around the dim room, suddenly, aware of how empty it felt. He hadn't even unpacked all his boxes yet. A few files, framed awards from his Navy days, and a photo of him and his older brother on a hiking trail, taken before the accident, sat in a half-open drawer. Jordan reached for it and stared for a long time. He remembered something his brother had told him in the hospital. You don't have to walk to lead, you just have to move forward. The next morning, Jordan was early. The receptionist blinked in surprise when he greeted her before opening time. He spent hours reviewing every maintenance log, enforcement letter, and resident report from the past year. The patterns became clearer. Fines issued to the same families. Requests ignored from homes with wheelchair ramps. Approvals fast-tracked only for certain names. This went deeper than him. Just before lunch, Jordan received a calendar invite marked urgent, compliance review requested by K. Bellwood. The meeting was set for the following Monday. 3 board members were listed. No warning. No agenda. Jordan stared at the screen, then minimized the window. The board might be listening to Karen's version of the story now, but by Monday, they were going to hear the whole truth. He powered down his monitor. Outside, the sky had clouded over. A storm was moving in. Quiet, but steady. He wasn't leaving. He was just getting started. The following Monday arrived with a steady drizzle and a pressure in the air that settled over Ridgepine Heights like a held breath. Jordan arrived 15 minutes early. He parked outside the community center, watching droplets streak across the windshield. Then slowly wheeled himself through the quiet hallway toward meeting room 2. The room already held 3 people: board President Alan Pierce, Treasurer Myra Shaw, and of course, Karen. She stood near the window, arms crossed, wearing an expression too calm to be casual. A manila folder lay in front of her, sealed with a plastic tab. Jordan nodded to the others, then wheeled into position at the long table. The chairs hadn't been adjusted for his access. He didn't mention it. Alan cleared his throat. This meeting was requested to review several ongoing complaints submitted about your performance, Jordan. This isn't a formal hearing yet, just an evaluation. Jordan gave a single nod. Understood. I assume we're reviewing the documents Karen brought. Karen didn't wait for permission. She slid the folder toward Alan, who opened it carefully. Mira leaned in. As they flipped through, Karen spoke in her usual composed tone. There have been patterns. Delayed responses. Inconsistent enforcement. A few homeowners even mentioned intimidation. Jordan let her talk. He knew the rhythm now. Build suspicion. Avoid details. Stay polite. It wasn't a confrontation, it was a performance. Do you have records of these complaints? He asked when she finished. Karen smiled. Of course. They're in the packet. Alan raised an eyebrow as he scanned. 1 sheet. This one claims Jordan issued a violation for landscaping to a house that doesn't have a lawn. Karen hesitated, then shifted in her seat. There may have been a mix-up. The homeowner corrected it before we followed up. Jordan leaned forward. Actually, that homeowner passed away last year. I visited his daughter when I first arrived. That property is vacant. A pause. Myra looked up from the paper, expression neutral. Alan folded the page and set it aside. Jordan opened his own file. I've brought documentation, including timestamps, email chains, and vendor communications that show exactly how these tasks were managed. He placed 3 USB drives on the table, labeled by date. You'll find that the alleged delays were either caused by vendor availability, board approvals, or ironically requests from Karen herself to hold off while she reviewed alternate proposals. Karen narrowed her eyes. Alan inserted one of the drives into the meeting room's display port. The screen lit up with a clean log, project schedules, time-stamped emails, and communications with vendors. Color-coded, organized, undeniable. Karen said nothing, but her jaw had stiffened. Jordan looked directly at Alan. I've also included footage from last week meeting room 2, Tuesday, 2:40 p.m. I think it will clarify how some of these complaints were generated. Alan clicked the file. The silent footage played, Karen and the unknown man reviewing documents, pointing to pre-typed complaint forms. Myra frowned. Who is that with you, Karen? Karen didn't answer immediately. Her face was still, but her fingers curled against the folder. He's a consultant I occasionally work with. He was advising me on HOA procedures. No approval for external consultation was requested. Alan said quietly, that's a breach. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. The room held stillness. Not tension, uncertainty. Jordan leaned back slightly. This meeting wasn't about complaints. It was a trap, but I figured if I showed up anyway, I might as well bring receipts. Outside, the rain had stopped. The silence in the room felt louder now. Alan looked at Mira, then at Karen. We'll need time to review this. The board will reconvene in 72 hours. As Jordan rolled toward the exit, Karen's voice stopped him. You're not going to win this. He paused, not turning around. I'm not here to win. I'm here to clean up the mess someone's been hiding under paperwork. And he left her sitting there, folder closed, mask cracking, storm coming. The next morning, the office door was ajar when Jordan arrived. That was OT. He'd locked it before leaving. He paused before entering, checking the keypad's entry log. The last recorded access showed his code, followed by one labeled override, admin key. Only 2 people had that override, the board president and Karen. He pushed the door open slowly. Nothing looked disturbed. The files were still stacked on his desk, the external drives tucked away in the drawer. But something didn't sit right. A pen had moved. A paperweight he never used now rested on top of his schedule. Someone had looked for something. Jordan didn't mention it. Instead, he opened a secure browser and pinged Luis's longtime friend and digital bloodhound. Luis had helped him more times than he could count, especially after the accident that had changed everything. Within minutes, Luis responded through a secure channel. I checked your network access logs like you asked. Someone tried to clone your credentials through the HOA cloud portal. The attempt failed, but it pinged the server. Guess who's listed under the attempt? He attached a screenshot. It showed a user profile labeled Cabelwitemp. Jordan stared at the screen for a moment. Karen wasn't just planting false claims. She was trying to get into private records, probably looking for something she could twist. He typed a quick reply. Back it up. Everything. I'll give them a chance to play fair, but just once. By mid-afternoon, he was walking the neighborhood. He'd made it a habit to visit 1 or 2 homes a day, face-to-face talks with residents, making sure voices weren't lost in paper trails. Today, he visited Mr. Alford, a quiet older man who used a walker and hadn't left his porch in months. As they chatted, Mr. Alford surprised him. I remember Karen stopping by last year, said the board would have to reconsider my garage ramp, called it an eyesore. Jordan frowned. The ramp. That's perfectly compliant. She didn't seem to care. Said I'd lose my visitor access if I kept bringing it up. It matched a story Jordan heard 2 weeks earlier from a single mom who'd had her yard flagged for unauthorized ornamentation. The so-called ornament, her son's painted wooden train. Karen had a history, but until now, it had been fragmented, hidden, beneath the shield of policy and charm. The puzzle pieces were forming a picture. Jordan returned to the office before closing time. On his desk sat a sealed envelope. No name, just his title printed across the front. Inside was a letter typed in courier font. "You've made your move. Don't forget everyone here answers to someone. And you're just passing through." There was no signature. But the card inside gave away more than the sender realized. It bore a faded stamp from a boutique printer that Karen had personally used for last year's HOA gala. Jordan placed the note inside an evidence folder and labeled it Threat Unofficial. He was documenting everything, now. No emotion. No reaction, just facts, building toward something she wouldn't see coming. That evening, he sat in his home office with the window cracked open. The neighborhood outside looked calm. Too calm, somewhere beneath those manicured lawns and matching shutters. A game was unfolding. He pulled up a folder titled, Board Patterns, Names, Motions, Votes. He cross-referenced each against Karen's property enforcement history, and that's when he found something else. Karen had purchased a second home quietly under her cousin's name, 2 blocks away. It wasn't registered in the HOA system. And strangely, no violations were ever filed there. Despite it being in clear breach of multiple guidelines, he leaned back. Karen wasn't just abusing policy, she was hiding something bigger. And now, he had a new address to visit. Jordan rolled quietly down Maple Hollow Lane just after sunset, avoiding the main sidewalk. The house he was looking for sat 2 blocks from the gated entrance, tucked behind a row of tall hedges and a privacy fence taller than regulation allowed. The place didn't match the neighborhood's symmetry. It stood slightly darker, windows tinted, mailbox missing. Something about it was ... absent. He double-checked the address. It matched the records Louise Pold purchased last fall, under a name with no other history in Ridgepine Heights. No HOA ID, no welcome letter, no inspection records. Jordan knew this shouldn't be possible. Every property in Ridgepine went through 6 levels of approval before closing. Yet this house had slipped in unnoticed. He parked nearby and approached. Slowly, there was no doorbell, no porch light. He reached into his jacket for the laminated HOA regulation manual, something he rarely carried in person. But tonight, it gave him a reason to knock. The door opened before he touched it. A man stood in the doorway, same one from the meeting room footage. Slim build, tidy hair, leather folder under one arm. He looked like someone rehearsing a calm expression. "Yes," he asked flatly. Jordan offered a polite nod. "Good evening, HOA, walkthrough. We noticed this address hasn't completed the occupancy check." The man didn't blink. "I'm just house sitting. For who?" The pause gave away more than words. "I'll let the homeowner respond," the man said, then shut the door slowly. Jordan remained outside for a moment. No name on the door. No visible security signs. And yet the man hadn't seemed surprised, he'd seemed prepared. Back in his vehicle, Jordan updated his notes and sent a voice message to Louise. "House is real. Guy from the meeting was there. To calm, something's not right." Louise responded. Minutes later, "I dug deeper. That purchase, it was pushed through after a manual override. Guess who signed off as witness?" Jordan didn't need to ask. He already knew. Karen Bellwood, but the more disturbing part came next. The property was listed as community reserve before the override. That means it was supposed to stay off the market. HOA land. You can't buy it without board approval. Which meant Karen hadn't just bent the rules, she'd rewritten them. Illegally. Jordan closed his eyes briefly. This was beyond harassment. She'd gone around the entire system, and somehow, the rest of the board hadn't noticed or hadn't wanted to notice. The next morning, Jordan returned to the office early again. He reviewed every board meeting transcript for the past 12 months. A pattern began to emerge: subtle changes, small policy votes disguised as budget line items, decisions passed when key members were absent. Karen had orchestrated them all. But what stood out most was a motion passed 5 months ago, titled Operational Discretion Authorization, Vice Chair. It gave her limited power to sign off on emergency decisions, limited lest no one was watching. As Jordan scrolled further, a new email alert popped up: subject, immediate vote, motion to suspend interim director Myers from Karen Bellwood to HOA board, no discussion. Just the motion. And a time-stamped 10 minutes from now. Jordan looked up at the clock. They were trying to remove him before the rest of the truth came out. But Karen had made one mistake. She assumed he'd show up to the meeting unprepared. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Jordan had already shared his full report with an external auditor, and the auditor wasn't just any contractor, it was a state compliance officer, and she had just confirmed her attendance at today's board session. The community hall was quieter than usual. Fewer residents loitered in the hallway, and even the receptionist had stepped away from her desk. Jordan could feel it in the air, something orchestrated behind the scenes. He rolled through the side entrance, the one near the loading dock. Bypassing the front dock, Karen wanted the meeting to look official, but rushed. The vote to suspend him was timed before residents could arrive and before full board attendance. That alone was telling. Inside the boardroom, Karen stood at the far end of the table, already holding a copy of the motion. Her expression was controlled too, smooth, like someone who knew the final score before the game even started. "You're early," she said. "So are you," Jordan replied evenly. Alan and Mira entered just behind him. Mira gave Jordan a subtle nod. She hadn't said much in the last few meetings, but her posture today looked different. Curious, cautious. Karen began without ceremony. "We're here to vote on an interim motion concerning the HOA director's continued fitness to serve. As stated in the charter, the board reserves the right to suspend personnel pending performance review." Especially under. Jordan calmly raised a hand. "Before we proceed, I believe someone else is joining us." Karen blinked. "Who?" A new voice spoke from the back of the room. "That would be me." All heads turned. A woman in her early 40s stepped forward, neatly dressed in gray slacks and a statuesque badge clipped to her lapel. She placed a binder on the table and extended her hand. "Erin Cole, Office of Community Housing Compliance. I received several flagged reports last week, anonymous tips referencing falsified enforcement actions, unregistered properties, and board misappropriation of procedural power. I've reviewed the material. This meeting is now under formal observation." Karen's smile slipped. Alan leaned forward. "Excuse me, this wasn't cleared through the board." "It didn't have to be," Erin interrupted. "Once the state receives a credible report concerning financial misuse or regulatory violations, we are authorized to audit immediately." Karen stepped back. "This is a misunderstanding." Erin opened the binder. "Is your name Karen Bellwood?" "Yes." "Are you aware that on March 14th, you submitted a motion bypassing board quorum to authorize private property acquisition on behalf of a third party?" Karen's face shifted. Not panic yet, but her throat moved as she swallowed. "That was within policy." "No, it wasn't," Erin replied. "Because the property was zoned as communal space and had a legal block preventing sale. You signed off as a witness to a transaction you had no authority to approve." Karen opened her folder, her last defense. "This motion isn't about me. It's about his inability to manage the HOA's needs." Jordan finally spoke again. "I'm happy to discuss performance. We can start with the 38 documented code violations your office ignored. Nearly all involving non-preferred residents. Or maybe the fact that your cousin's home never passed inspection, but still received funding for upgrades." Erin added. "And let's not forget the fabricated complaints, several of which match the handwriting of your consultant." "A consultant? With no legal contract on file." The room went still. Karen stared at Jordan with a sharp, cold glare. For a moment, something passed through her eyes, something raw, unguarded. Then she collected her papers. "I think I need legal counsel." Erin didn't stop her. "You do." As Karen walked out, Alan sat back, exhaling. "What now?" Erin closed her binder. "Now you wait. My office will notify you of the formal hearing date." Jordan didn't move. He watched Karen disappear through the hallway. The same hallway he had rolled through a dozen times under watchful eyes. Only now, the eyes were turning on her, and she was no longer in control. By the time Jordan returned to his office, the storm had passed. Not the one outside, the real one. The one that had stirred within boardrooms and back channels. Karen's exit had left a heavy silence behind her. One that wasn't quite relief and wasn't yet resolution. But Jordan knew better than to mistake silence for safety. He locked the door behind him and turned on the desk light. A thick folder sat unopened from the compliance officer, marked confidential. He'd wait to read that. Right now, he needed to address the ripple effects Karen had carefully engineered. While no one was looking, he opened a drawer and pulled out the resident case logs, everything flagged, dismissed, delayed, or oddly worded. One file caught his attention. Case number 47D, resident, Jaime Rowe violation, unauthorized. Business activity, garage art studio that had been months ago. Jordan remembered it because the pictures submitted didn't even show the property clearly. The complaint had been typed but unsigned, and Jaime had fought back, arguing that her art wasn't for sale, it was therapy. Following her recovery from surgery, he called her. She picked up on the second ring. Voice cautious. "Mrs. Rowe, this is Jordan Myers, from HOA administration. I just wanted to follow up on the complaint about your garage last February." "Oh, that," she sighed. "I thought it was over. Do you remember who visited your house after the citation?" "I never saw anyone. Just a paper on the door. My neighbor told me a woman in a beige SUV drove by a few times that week." Jordan scribbled a note. "Karen drove a beige SUV. You mind if I stop by?" he asked. 10 minutes later, he rolled up to Jaime's home. She greeted him with a warm but tired smile, her cane resting against the porch rail. "I always got the feeling someone was watching my house," she said, motioning him inside. "A man even came by once, said he was with the city. Asked if I had licenses posted. But I checked, no such inspection was scheduled." "Did you get his name?" She shook her head. "But I got a photo." She handed him her phone. It was the same man from the meeting room video, Karen's consultant. Jordan leaned in. The photo captured the man standing near the driveway, glancing back at the house. He wore a visitor badge, except it wasn't one of theirs. The logo was blurry but partially visible. He took a screenshot and sent it to Louise. Within minutes, a reply came through. "That's a fake badge. Logos lifted from a property investment firm in New Jersey. Found a LinkedIn profile. Guess who? This guy is." Louise sent over a profile. Name: David R. Lasker. Occupation: Acquisitions Strategist RSM, Management Group RSM, the same firm that tried to buy out properties in Ridgepine Heights last year right before Karen started pushing redevelopment surveys. Jordan's blood chilled. This wasn't about control, it was about takeover. Karen hadn't just abused policy, she'd been laying groundwork to quietly push families out, mark homes as violations, and let RSM swoop in to purchase them at reduced value, all while hiding behind HOA letters and fake complaints. And somehow, no one had seen it until now. He turned back to Jaime. "Thank you. You may have just exposed the real story." She tilted her head. "I thought I was just protecting my art." "You were," he said, voice low. "And you may have protected your neighborhood too." He left her house just as dusk began to paint the streets in soft gold. But under that quiet evening glow, the truth had started to unfold. And the next board meeting was only 2 days away. This time, Jordan wouldn't just be defending his job, he'd be presenting the full story. And this time, someone would have to answer for what had been hiding in plain sight. Jordan spent the next morning reviewing records from the Ridgepine Heights Planning Office, public zoning maps, construction permits, and a rarely accessed folder labeled development proposals, tabled or denied. He was searching for something specific, proof that Karen had been trying to sell out the community all along. Louise came through again, found a PDF buried in a backup server. Karen submitted a vision statement for Ridgepine 6 months ago under an alias KB, Strategic Revitalization. It references converting 12 properties into mixed-use commercial spaces. Jordan opened the document. There it was in bold. Phase 1, redevelop South Ridge. Block into boutique storefronts and co-housing. Every house marked for conversion was linked to someone. Karen had harassed every single one. He cross-checked it with HOA violations. The pattern became obvious. She targeted residents least likely to push back: elderly, single parents, people recovering from illness or injury. People like him. This wasn't personal vendetta anymore. It was manufactured displacement. The upcoming board meeting would be crucial. That evening, Jordan sent a private message to the board members who hadn't yet taken sides. He didn't ask for support, he simply asked them to read a folder labeled "For Your Conscience." Inside were screenshots, logs, complaint patterns, and Karen's hidden proposal. At the meeting, the hall was packed. Residents stood along the back wall. A quiet current of curiosity and tension buzzed through the air. Karen's seat was empty. Jordan rolled up to the front, placing the large binder at the center of the table. The projector screen behind him displayed the HOA charters, the clause titled Resident Protection from Exploitation or Misuse of Policy. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. In the past year, he began, dozens of residents were cited for obscure or outdated violations. Most of them were false. Some never existed. And some were used as leverage, quiet pressure, to give up their homes. He clicked through the slides, photos, letters, discrepancies, faces, and behind every one of these cases, he continued, was a path leading back to a single strategy. It wasn't enforcement, it was acquisition. Gasps moved through the room. Alan, one of the previously silent board members, spoke up. Are you saying this was organized displacement? I'm saying this community was targeted from within. Jordan stepped aside as Erin Cole from State Compliance joined him at the front. She opened her own folder. Karen Bellwood is now under formal investigation, and as of this morning, the firm known as RSM Management has been barred from acquiring Ridgepine properties pending further review. People started murmuring. Mira leaned in. What about the homeowners? She already pressured. Erin nodded. We're working on that. Anyone who sold under false pretenses may be eligible for reversal or compensation. But we'll need testimony. Jordan glanced at the crowd. Faces once filled with quiet frustration were now lit with cautious hope. Jaime Rowe sat near the back. Arms crossed, but smiling faintly. Then a voice cut through the noise. Low, measured. You think this is over? Karen stood near the side entrance, arms folded, flanked by two men in business suits. Erin straightened. This is a formal proceeding. You're not permitted to speak until. Karen ignored her. Jordan thinks he's a hero, but he doesn't understand how deep this goes. Jordan didn't flinch. Then tell us. Let's hear what you were really planning. Karen stepped forward slowly, her eyes steady. I wasn't the one who started this. Ridgepine's future was sold off long before I got here. She pulled a crumpled letter from her purse and dropped it on the table. It was signed by the HOA founder, and it hinted that the land had never legally belonged to the HOA in the first place. The room froze as the letter slid across the table, landing near Erin Cole's binder. Even the usual hum of side whispers vanished. The only sound was the soft hiss of the overhead lights. Karen folded her arms. Before you all crown him the savior of Ridgepine, maybe read the letter your founding president signed 30 years ago. Jordan opened the worn envelope and pulled out a single sheet-edged but clean typewritten with an original signature at the bottom. Miriam Fletcher. HOA Chair-1993. The words were clear and unsettling. This association acknowledges temporary custodianship of the Ridgepine development until reassignment to parent holding, per Silent Clause 9D, effective within 35 years. Jordan read it again. The implications hit fast. Karen wasn't bluffing, there was a clause hidden deep in the HOA's original charter, one never activated, never shared in modern versions. Where did you get this? Erin asked. Karen tilted her head. A box in storage. I figured you'd all ignore it if I brought it up the proper way, so I waited. And I acted. Maybe too aggressively. Jordan stared at the document, then at Karen. You used this as justification to harass and displace people. You thought a clause gave you a crown. Karen's lips curled slightly. You think I'm the only one who would have used it? Mira stepped forward. So what happens now? Is Ridgepine even legitimate anymore? Erin answered quietly. This clause doesn't hold on its own. The silent clause Karen refers to would need to have been reaffirmed in every charter update and voted on by each incoming board. Jordan tapped his fingers along the binder. Which it wasn't. He rolled backward, turning to face the full room. This community belongs to its residents. No document erases that. No clause gives someone permission to steamroll over people just because they think they've found a shortcut. Karen moved as if to speak again, but this time, Erin raised a hand. You're done for today, Ms. Bellwood. Security approached. Karen didn't resist. She simply handed over a second document quietly, bitterly, and walked out. Erin unfolded it. A deed transfer proposal. RSM Management had already drafted contracts to buy out the HOA and convert it into a for-profit district. But now, those papers meant nothing. By 3 p.m., a formal moratorium was issued on all development activity in Ridgepine Heights. Every complaint issued over the past year was set for review, and Karen Bellwood was under investigation for civil fraud, coercion, and abuse of administrative power. Back at his office, Jordan finally allowed himself a moment of stillness. The sunlight warmed the window behind him. His reflection showed a man who'd been tested, pushed, doubted, and who stood firm anyway. He glanced at the faded photograph on his shelf. His father, also in a wheelchair, holding a blueprint of Ridgepine from decades ago. He had fought to make this place possible for families. For people of every background. Jordan whispered softly, "We're not done." Later that week, a neighborhood gathering filled the central green. Tables of food, children playing, and Neighbors talking face-to-face instead of through paper notices. Jaime Rowe approached with a fresh canvas in hand, an abstract painting of a rising sun over winding roads. She handed it to Jordan. "For your office," she said. "I thought you'd like something that looks like a beginning." He smiled. "That's exactly what it is." Because what had started as a battle to keep his position became something far more powerful. Jordan didn't just defend his job. He reclaimed the heart of a community. The end.